Good evening, friends, and welcome to the Sunday service. We begin each service by reciting the Sunday congregational prayer. The words will be shown on the screen. Let us now pray together. We offer our salutations to the all-loving being who endows all beings with consciousness. We meditate on the Lord, who is the origin of the universe. Lord, thou abidest in all. Thou art all. Thou assumest all forms. Thou art the origin and goal of all. Thou art the self of all. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss. Salutations unto thee. May the world be peaceful. May the wicked become gentle. May all creatures think of mutual welfare. May their minds be occupied with what is spiritual and abiding. May our hearts be immersed in selfless love for the Lord. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Tonight's talk is rated V for Vedanta, and it discusses Advaitic Vedanta topics in direct and straightforward terms. According to Swami Savagatananda, the philosophy of Vedanta is a relentless and endless search for the truth. Vedanta says that the study and practice of its teachings culminate in the highest happiness. And although the objective of Vedantic teachings is for the growth and ultimate freedom of its students, some topics dealing with the impediments to this growth and freedom caused by one's ego, one's attachment to the hollow worldly values, and the need to undo prior psychological conditioning. Maybe it's unsettling for some listeners. As Swami Adishwarananda put it in his talk, the direct way knowledge is fire. Before fire can illumine, it burns. The talk will proceed without any further disclaimers, so viewer discretion is advised. So I'd like to begin with the four great sayings of Vedanta, the Mahavakyani. The first is, I am Atma Brahma. This self, this Atman, is Brahman. It represents the northern monastery of the four monasteries. It comes from the Atharva Veda and comes from the Mandukya Upanishad. Next we come to the east, where you have Prajnanam Brahma. Brahma is Prajnana. Next we come to the south. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. This is from the Yajurveda. And last, perhaps the most familiar, the most well-known, is Tatvamasi, translated as that you are, or thou art that. It comes from the Chandogya Upanishad, the Western Monastery, and the Samaveda. So these are the four great sayings of Vedanta. Now the testimony of the rishis who have experienced reality in this way gave the name of their philosophy Advaita Vedanta. Dva meaning two, so Adva means not two or non-dual. So thus Advaita Vedanta is a non-dual philosophy. And it teaches that non-dual consciousness is the highest and only reality. Some Advaitic schools say that the words themselves, dual and non-dual, imply each other, and thus even these words are not exactly correct. And we'll see a discussion on this point later. But for now, let's just take the general view that there is one universal seer, a single conscious entity in the entire universe, which is the seer and knower of all, and as stated in the Mahavakyani, we are that seer. Every object, whether it exists as an actuality or as an idea, is witnessed by that one universal witness consciousness, which is us, keep that in mind, and all else are objects. Even the movements of the mind are considered objects of that witness conscious. Mind is not the source of that witness consciousness, as some modern theories assert. According to Vedanta, the idea is that the consciousness arises from matter is incorrect. It's an incorrect understanding of reality. And a common joke often used by the teachers of Vedanta is that the philosopher Descartes, who said, "I think, therefore I am," put the cart before the horse. Vedanta would actually say, "I am that, therefore I observe thought." And so Vedanta sages describe this oneness with Brahman using three words: Sat, meaning existence; Chit, meaning knowledge, and here knowledge is in the sense of prajnanam, as we saw in the Mahavakyani, which is more of an intuitive knowledge, an intuitive grasping, rather than a factual or book-type knowledge. And then Ananda, bliss, the fountain which underlies even the most gross happinesses and simple joys, is the fountain of Ananda. And these are our nature. And so Vedanta says these three, Sat, Chit, Ananda, describe our true nature as close as possible within the realms of words and symbols. But the teachers also emphasize that all descriptions inevitably fall short, as the reality defies description and definition. But realization of these truths through direct experience is the only way to truly understand, or truly appreciate, better than understand perhaps, appreciate the exclamation of the sages, one of which goes like this: "Ye children of immortality, even those living in the highest sphere, the way is found. The way out of all of this darkness is by perceiving that which is beyond all darkness. There is no other way." In fact, Vedanta further says that this direct experience is the only experience and the only endeavor in life which can be all-fulfilling and all-satisfying. Activity in any other direction falls short and is thus considered wasting the time and energy allotted to us. Thus, working to remove the impediments to this experience should be the goal of life, the sole goal of life, perhaps even in the spirit of "Go, sell all thy has, give the proceeds to the poor, and follow me." If we are not already experiencing our true nature as exclaimed in the Mahavakyani, Vedanta says we are suffering from two problems. The first problem is that of non-apprehension. We fail to see, fail to experience, fail to live the truth of that which already is. Non-apprehension is the root cause of the reason we do not experience our true nature as Sat, Chit, Ananda, and the experience of the truth as proclaimed by Vedantic sages. The second problem derives from the non-apprehension and is called misapprehension. And so tonight we're going to explore these ideas using several references, including Swami Adishwarananda's book, The Vedanta Way to Peace and Happiness, the Mandukya Upanishad, and a few excerpts from the Yoga Vasishtha, also called the Maharamayana. The foreword of Swami Venkateshananda's translation of the Yoga Vasishtha was written by Swami Ranganathananda, the 13th president of the Ramakrishna Math and Mission. And so I'll paraphrase from Swami Ranganathan's foreword. He says, "The especial appeal of the Yoga Vasishtha lies in its thoroughly rational approach. It dares to bridge the gulf between secular and sacred. It is this comprehensive, rational, and practical philosophy which the modern world needs to rescue itself from the stagnation of worldliness." Swami Venkateshananda of the Divine Life Society has been working tirelessly for the decades to spread the life-giving message of yoga and Vedanta in the East and West, has done a great service to spiritual seekers in breaking out this translation of the Yoga Vasishtha. And so I've selected a few verses from that work. It's about 700 pages. It's quite an extensive work. But we're going to explore a couple of verses in this talk tonight that I found not only explain in a logical sense some of the subtle concepts, but they have an observable, a directly observable and instructional component to them as well. And then along the way, we will review what they call the 4 gatekeepers to this sought-after experience, which also comes in that book. So with that, let's see, actually before we go on, let me just tell you that the text asserts that without the study of these teachings, these examples and the stories given by the sage Vasishta, one cannot achieve the highest. The teacher does, however, allow that those who are not drawn directly to the Vasishta teachings can take to the study of any other scripture dealing with final liberation and self-knowledge. Now, Swami Vivekananda had said, "Arise, awake, and stop not until the goal is reached." And the implied goal in Swami Vivekananda's statement is God realization or self-realization as claimed in the Mahavakyani. The introduction to the Yoga Vasishta put it this way: whatever scripture, whatever path, whatever teacher one follows, the student should continue until all psychological conditioning is removed. And this really gives us an unflinching and practical statement as to what the goal is and what is required. Okay, so the first of the 4 verses that I want to explore tonight is now partially showing. The box on the bottom is intentional and it'll be uncovered later. But it says, we contemplate that glorious self, which is revealed as an experience of pure bliss, ananda, when. Okay. So later on, we'll go look at the when and the how. But for now, just know that we're going to take a look at this, which is one of our true natures, right? Ananda. When does it come? So we'll look at that. I want to go to one more verse, the next verse that I'm... All right, there we go. We contemplate the self in which objects are reflected. And again, there's more to the story here, which we'll explore. But you may wonder, how do we reconcile the idea of a non-dual Vedanta with objects? And we'll see that the full verse actually goes on to provide some insight into this. And we'll have some supporting dialogue from Vasishta also. But before we go on to examine these verses in more detail, I'd like to start with a story. The story needs to go forward. Every story needs an overture, and that lead character there that just snuck in at the end of the slide wasn't willing to negotiate. He wanted to make a big entrance. So the story goes like this. Imagine that there are 2 gardeners and they share a common tool shed, as depicted in the screen. And so after working in the gardens, in their respective gardens all day, they return to the tool shed as darkness starts to set in. And in the twilight, in the darkness, each sees what appears to be a large snake in the left corner of the shed. So they see this snake and they drop their tools and they go home. And that night, each one has a dream. The first person has a nightmare about a poisonous snake with venom so deadly that even a single drop is lethal. And that person spends the remainder of the night planning on how to destroy the snake while maintaining a safe distance from its strike and bite. The second person dreamed that it was a constricting type snake, and so they moved kind of slowly. So they said, well, I don't need to worry so much about being in the strike zone, so maybe I can go out with just a knife or a sword and just chop it up. So they both spent that, and then finally daybreak comes. And in the daybreak, in the morning sun, they realize that it wasn't a snake at all, that it was a rope. And so each immediately realizes how baseless and how crazy were the dreams and the all-night planning sessions about this snake. And so this story is called The Rope and the Snake, and it's often used by Vedanta teachers to illustrate this illusion of how this world of apparent multiplicity is imposed on the single universal consciousness. And the story actually illustrates some important concepts. See, both of the gardeners in the story shared the same fundamental problem. That was non-apprehension. Neither one of them apprehended that there was a rope there. See, the truth of the rope was masked by the illusion of the snake. So the truth was not apprehended. And though both of them were suffering from the same non-apprehension, the reaction to that by each person was different. And so although we may all suffer from the same root cause, non-apprehension of truth, this non-apprehension gives rise to innumerable interpretations and behaviors and reactions. And so the dreams and the subsequent planning actions in the story symbolize that the resulting misapprehension of truth can be different for all. And each person's misapprehension carries with it certain predispositions to certain ideas, certain behaviors, certain activities, certain likes, certain dislikes, which each person has. And now those likes, dislikes, behaviors may make sense to that individual or similar individuals having similar misapprehensions. The root cause remains the same. We have non-apprehension of the truth. And in fact, we can extend the story to even more people. We can imagine a third neighbor who's fond of snakes and may have spent the night dreaming about what a nice companion that snake would have made, and might go out in the morning with sweets and food items, hoping to lure the snake into a cage to take it home and make a pet out of it. But for that person too, even though motivated by the fondness for the snake, the morning light still reveals the baselessness and craziness of the hope and fantasy of taming the snake. And so you see, the misapprehensions can vary, but the goal here is to get to the truth. In the Mandukya Upanishad, which has this great saying, as we already saw, I am Atma Brahman, this self, this Atman is Brahman, says that if we consider the waking state to be real, the dream state must also be considered real. And similarly, if we consider the dreams to be unreal, then likewise this waking state must also be considered equally unreal. So either they're both real or they're both unreal. Now the Mandukya Upanishad gives a great detailed analysis and makes many arguments to support this conclusion. We're not going to get into the details of those. I've talked about some of them in a previous talk. Well, let me just give a quick summary of where we are so far. The reality, according to Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, is one universal consciousness. Our true nature is existence, knowledge, and bliss. Those who do not experience this do not know their true nature. Non-apprehension of this truth is the root cause, and the same for all of us. The dreams which result are misapprehensions and are individual and unique. Each dream is a play amongst the apparent separate entities forming the falsely perceived multiplicity. And according to one's view of the illusory multiplicity, the snake, the play goes on and on until one frees himself or herself from the cycle through direct experience. And further, Vedanta says that we cannot realize our true nature within the realm of misapprehension, the dream. Rearranging or reordering falsely separated parts, or accepting some pieces and rejecting others, or trying to change the dream will not necessarily lead to the realization of the highest. Most discussions concerning the multiplicity and most questions are really about the snake. So we must remove the root cause, which is non-apprehension. This is achieved only through direct experiences. So thus the teachers exclaim, arise, awake from the dream and stop not, until the psychological conditioning, the goal, is removed entirely. So now, to understand what conditioning is being discussed, I want to turn to the book from Swami Adishwarananda, The Vedanta Way to Peace and Happiness. And he explains there on page 36 3 types of egos and the psychological conditionings and adjustments to those egos which must be made. So first he discusses something called the infantile or the tasmic ego. He describes that as being very weak. It cannot accept the burdens of life. The characteristic behaviors are defensive and self-incriminating and pessimistic. He says that an infantile ego has no self-identity, no self-image, and that an infantile ego is always swayed by mass opinion. He then goes on to describe the adolescent or the rajasic ego as aggressive, unsteady, self-aggrandizing, always tries to dominate, and is overly optimistic and temperamental. The attitude is, I am the center of everything and the world is my circumference, the implied idea being that the world owes me and should serve me happiness and all that I desire. And so Swami Adishwarananda says that all problems, complaints, disharmonies are rooted in one of these 2 immature ego states. Neither of these immature states can see reality correctly. They do not have clear vision, and therefore they lie as the roots of our worldly problems. The field of activity for the immature ego states are self-love, self-obsession, and in building elaborate fantasies. Such egos almost exist totally in exclusion of reality. Unconsciously, they bring onto themselves neurosis in order to avoid the harsh facts of life. And here you get some glimpse into the science of Vedanta and yoga and what the modern scientists might call the mind-body connection or psychosomatic illnesses. Swami Adishwarananda then goes on to talk about the mature ego, the sattvic ego, as being integrated and purposeful, self-controlled, neither aggressive, neither defensive, temperate and free from dependency. The mature ego is endowed with a sense of identity, a sense of reality, a sense of responsibility, and a sense of duty and the ability to adjust to change. A mature ego, and this is quoting from Swami, is actually less ego. It is measured and clear in both understanding and action. In the Uddhava Gita, the last message of Krishna, the traits of all 3 of these egos are described in much more detail. However, Sri Ramakrishna summed it up very simply. He put it as follows. This is a quote from Sri Ramakrishna. The egoism has covered everything like a veil. All troubles come to an end when the ego dies. Okay, so it's a common technique when writing stories and movies to show a short, incomplete scene near the end and then go back to the beginning and work your way towards that scene, completing it, and then bringing the movie or the story to completion. And I've kind of taken that approach tonight. I started by showing the partial verses, which we want to explore in great detail. Those are coming up. But now we have to start from the very beginning and work our way forward to those verses.
The middle one.
The middle one. The beginning. All right, there it is. So you may wonder why I start with sort of the celestial music and things, but that's exactly the way the Yoga Vasishtha starts, actually. It starts out in the heavenly realms with some, they call them apsaras, heavenly nymphs or nymphs, and you got a lot of them flying around and everything. And then finally we come to a character named Arishthanemi. And Arishthanemi, you can see over in the right picture there, was a yogi of the first order, and he was trying with the utmost sincerity and practicing deep austerities. And in an attempt to distract him, the god Indra sends one of these celestial nymphs to try to distract him, and that's what's being pictured over there. And the intent there, Indra wanted to lure Arishthanemi to the heavenly realm. And so Arishthanemi inquired about the value and nature of heaven. And so Indra's messenger answered him saying that, well, in heaven, one gets rewards proportional to one's earthly behaviors. And then once all of your merits are exhausted, again, you return to the earth to try again, to realize the highest. And then you have to live out another incarnation. And so this cycle we know as samsara, or the cycle of birth and death. And this goes on and repeats until we finally achieve moksha, or liberation. And so Arishthanemi, being already well-versed in scripture and practices, recognized this, and he rejected the rewards of heaven, seeing no value at all in repeating this cycle of birth and death. He said, these heavenly rewards are as transitory as the impermanence of all earthly joys. He said, go away. The messenger went away. So Indra wasn't going to settle for that, and he sends the messenger back, and he says, all right, go tell Arishthanemi that he must go seek the advice of the sage Valmiki before rejecting these glories of heaven. So Arishthanemi said, okay, well, let me go. And he met Valmiki. And he asked the question, well, what is the way to free oneself from the cycle of birth and death and achieve liberation or moksha? And so Valmiki then narrated the dialogue between Vasishtha and Rama, which forms the teachings of the Vasishtha Yoga. Now, teachers of Vedanta describe the experience of multiplicity as a confusion, much like the illusion which causes the sky to appear blue. And we know, at least in the terms of physics, the Rayleigh scattering, that the sky appears blue due to the scattering of the different wavelengths of light from the particles. But we also know, if you've ever been in a plane, no matter how high the plane goes, the space immediately outside of the window of the plane never turns blue. It's only the blue. We only see it off in the distance. It's an optical illusion. And there's a similar idea for rainbows as well. You'll never catch a rainbow. You'll only see it from a distance. And so similarly, teachers of Vedanta say that the apparent universe of multiplicity is an illusion. I'll quote now from Swami Adishwarananda, the same book, Vedanta Way to Peace and Happiness. This manifestation of Brahman as the manifold universe is not real, but apparent. Through its inscrutable power called Maya, the transcendent Brahman appears to be conditioned by time and space, and to manifest itself as the personal God, the world of matter and souls. Maya veils the ultimate reality, and in its place projects various appearances, hiding the real and making the unreal appear real. Avidya, another word for Maya, is that which, also ignorance is another word they sometimes use. Avidya is that which obstructs the vision of truth. In the language of religion, avidya is sin. From the perspective of ethics, avidya is immorality. From the point of view of aesthetics, it is ugliness. And in the realm of logic, it is fallacy. Another name of vidya is Maya. Avidya is Maya. Maya is the very fabric of life and is made of name and form. Maya is the very mind which attempts to divide the indivisible and limit the unlimitable. Let's remember this verse because it's going to come up again at the very end. Maya is the very mind which attempts to divide the indivisible and limit the unlimitable. Even our seemingly solid physical bodies are an illusion. Now, using a parable titled The Story of Leela, Vasishta explains to Rama how one's ethereal body can easily transform into other ethereal bodies. And he taught that it's no different from the way a dreaming person can move from one form to another, or taking on their childhood at one moment and then switching to their old age in another moment during the same dream. And Vasishta emphasized that a yogi's true body is actually invisible and ethereal. Only the ignorant think that the yogi has a body. And when the yogi body falls, the ignorant think that the yogi is dead. So then Rama asks a question to Vasishta. How does a yogi's body become an ethereal body? And then he gets scolded by Vasishta right there. He says, Rama, so many times I have explained this to you, and still you do not understand. There are only ethereal bodies. It is ignorance that creates a physical body. The physical body is not real. The words physical body and ignorance are synonymous, reprimanded Vasishta. And of course, we can sympathize with Rama. I mean, we hear Vedantic discourses and similar teachings again and again, and it takes so much study, so much contemplation, years of sustained effort to understand and finally experience these as a reality. You can see that dedicated soul over there, trying to keep to his focus without being distracted, and there are a lot of temptations, right? So it takes a lot. So we can sympathize with Rama that he's going to ask this question over and over again. But then Valmiki advised, it's better not to dwell on this worldly confusion, and in fact makes a stronger statement. He says, unless and until this conviction of the illusory nature of the world appearance comes to the seeker, the realization of one's true nature, as an existence, knowledge, and bliss, is not possible. I'll go back to Swami Yudhishwarananda, same book, Vedanta Way to Peace and Happiness. The supreme goal of life, according to Vedanta, is moksha, or liberation. Liberation is the realization of the soul's identity with Brahman, the absolute reality. We saw this already in the Mahavakyani. I am Atma Brahman. Liberation is not merely the cessation of suffering, but an experience of intense bliss. The realization is called self-knowledge, which alone can conquer death. Immortality is not the result of any spiritual discipline. It is revelation. Spiritual discipline purifies the heart, and in the mirror of the pure heart, the immortal self is reflected. Knowledge, self-knowledge, is a burning realization that totally transforms a person. It must be obtained in this life. Self-knowledge is the consummation of all desires. The liberated soul is the free soul, who is never deluded by the world of multiplicity. Such a person never makes a false step and never sets a bad example. Such a free soul in the body may experience disease, old age, decay, but having recognized them as to belonging to the body, remains undisturbed and even-minded. So let us continue to hear, study, contemplate, and meditate until we can make these experience these teachings as a reality in our own life. Now, like the despondency of Arjuna in the opening chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, the dialogue in the Yoga Vasishta begins with Rama also in a state of despondency. Rama had just returned from a pilgrimage around the kingdom of his father. He had visited all the holy sites and observed the people carefully in all of the villages. And then soon after he returned from that pilgrimage, he became emaciated and remained silent. He lost interest in his rituals and other activities and offered no reason at all to anybody and stayed alone in his room most of the time. Now his fathers and others in his father's court repeatedly asked whenever they did see him, Rama, what's wrong, what's wrong? And again he replied, nothing is wrong, nothing is wrong. And then the sage Vashishta then intervenes with an important Vedantic logic concept and says that nothing manifests without there first being a cause. And he told that to Rama's father and the people in the court, who then persisted to ask Rama what's wrong. And then eventually Rama does answer. And that answer comes in the form of a chapter-long diatribe, and I can only describe it as a diatribe, where he explains and enumerates in great detail all of the reasons for his despondency. And that diatribe is not for the faint of heart. And I'll leave the details who want them to get a copy and read it for themselves. Instead, I think I will substitute with a story. All right, up or down, Charlie? Middle button. Middle. Thank you. All right. Before I tell a story, just in case you don't understand, that opening lick comes from the movie Jaws. It's a climatic moment in the movie Jaws when the shark is about to appear, so just in case you hadn't heard that before, and then I follow it up with a thunder sequence of my own writing, and then those last four measures from Chopin actually became a really favorite of Hollywood. You probably know it from Star Wars or from I think it was from the 20th Century Fox fanfare back in the 1960s or so. So I'm using that to basically just introduce each of my stories. But so now we can talk about the story here. And it starts out with a person having difficulties perhaps in life, decides to go for a walk to the woods, out in the forest really. And so that person goes out in the woods, and after wandering around for a while, encounters an elephant, a large elephant, which starts charging at the person. And he says, well, I don't want to get stomped on by this big giant elephant, so he turns to run, and his path is cut off by what we would only call the Grim Reaper. I guess it would be some kind of celestial goddess or something, the goddess of death or the god of death, Yama or something there with the big sickle. And so now he's got an elephant chasing from behind and death and facing him in the front. So he sees this big tree, a nice healthy big tree, and he says, well, if I can climb up this tree, I don't think elephants can climb trees, so I'll go up the tree and get away from this elephant. But he, after repeated attempts, could not climb the tree, could not climb. So with exasperation and the last bit of hope, there's this dead kind of tree there, barely hanging on to life. So he goes and he says, well, if I jump over this nice well of water and just hang on to this tree, the elephant won't get me. So he jumps and grabs onto these two branches, which are barely alive in the first place, and he's hanging there. And then he looks down and finds out there's 1,000 cobras at the bottom of the well. And he can hear them hissing and things, and so now he's in quite a fix, right? And then, if that doesn't make matters worse, two rats come, a white one and a black one. And they start chewing on the branches, which are already partially dead anyway, and it's not going to be long, I'll tell you. Those rats are going to chew right through those branches, and then you know the end of that story. But then the elephant comes, and he starts shaking the tree with his trunk, and he starts pounding the tree. And there happened to be a beehive at the top of the tree, and a few drops of honey start dropping down from the beehive. And every once in a while, he'll stick out his tongue, that person hanging there, and gets a taste of honey and thinks, oh, how wonderful. How wonderful my life, how wonderful my current circumstance, right? And the moral of the story here, first, the forest symbolizes the world of multiplicity. The wandering person is the afflicted soul. The mad elephant is old age, chasing us down. The demoness with the sickle, of course, is death. The tree, the healthy tree, Swami Adishwarananda describes it as the tree of righteousness, but only a righteous person can climb it. So apparently this person was unable to climb it. So then the dead tree with the frail branches ready to snap off, it's kind of the lease of life, right? We all get some life allotted to us by the gods as the prayer goes, but it doesn't last forever. The black and white wraps represent day and night, or actually the bright fortnight and the dark fortnight, meaning symbolizing the passage of time. The honey from the shaken tree, we all get some desires satisfied once in a while, some brief tastes of enjoyment from here to here. The deep well, of course, is the pit of illusory enjoyments, and the thousand cobras is the thousands of desires. And so that's sort of the story. And so the moral of the story, as Swami Adishwarananda put it, was that the fact that life is plagued by suffering, individuals somehow continue to weave dreams of enjoyment and everlasting happiness. And so Swami Adishwarananda, after writing this story, wrote this. The foregoing may sound morbid and pessimistic, but then fact is fact. And if you know this Swami, I actually met this Swami. He was the first Swami when I came here in 2004. He gave a retreat. It was the first retreat I ever attended. A very interesting personality. He's got some YouTube videos which you kind of watch, and they have the same kind of, ebb and flow that I'm giving you, some hard-hitting Vedanta, but every few minutes he puts in a joke. And the reason I think he puts in the joke, he never told me why, is that, you have that Mary Poppins song, right? A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. And you see, turn the heat down every once in a while, right? Make people laugh. Yes, it's a serious topic, but it's not without its light moments too. And actually unrelated to this, but it's related, I'll share it. Just before Swami, I was meeting with him, I think last week or the week before on some other business, and he had told me that Swami Vivekananda was giving a talk, a very intense talk. And he kept hitting Vedanta truth after Vedantic truth after Vedantic truth. And finally, Ramakrishna apparently appeared right in front of him and said, "Hey, slow down. Take it easy." And so we put in some jokes every once in a while just to keep it light. But this is Swami Adishwarananda's fact is fact. And he was very much like that. He had a joke every few minutes in all of his stories, but telling some very important truths as well. Okay, so now the title of the talk was The Four Gatekeepers. And so I want to just talk a little bit about the four gatekeepers of moksha. The first one is called self-control. And I'll just give some points about it. And this is not the four yogas. A few people had mentioned to me at the beginning, are you talking about the four yogas as the four gatekeepers? No, this is different. This comes from the Yoga Vasishta, and they're literally called the four gatekeepers. But the first one is self-control, and it says, whatever in this world is gained by self-effort. When failure is encountered, it is due to slackness in the effort. What is called fate is fictitious. Self-effort is of two types, that from previous lives and that being undertaken in this very life. And then fate is nothing but the accumulated results of the self-effort of many lives. And there's a constant, the important thing I think as students of Vedanta is that there's a constant conflict between these two efforts of the previous lives and the effort being made in this life. And whichever is more powerful will triumph. So we're called to act and make every effort and on all of this. The signs of progress in self-control are as the mind is peaceful and tranquil. It's gradually freed from all illusions and hallucinations, right? And you think back to what we talked about, the immature egos which live in illusions and hallucinations. A self-controlled person does not necessarily seek anything or reject anything. They kind of accept what life brings and what comes their way. The second gatekeeper is called inquiry. And the advice here from the sages is, first, purify your intelligence by an intense and sustained study of the scriptures. Second, using that focused, pure intelligence, constantly inquire what is true. And Swami Savagatananda, who used to teach back here in the 80s and 70s, always said that in his book for Vedanta for the Common Man. He always would say, forever ask, always ask, whenever you hear something, is it true? Is it true? Is it true? And use that as a test, as an activity as you go through life. And this inquiry has many fruits, according to Vasishta. First, it gives you strength. It gives you efficiency and efficacy in action. And remember, in the Bhagavad Gita 2, it says, Yoga Kamasu Kaushalam. Yoga is efficiency in action. So the more your mind is purified and focused, even in simple activities, day-to-day activities, your efficiency grows, your efficacy, your outcomes grow. So then it brings prosperity and kingdoms. And of course, those are all, by the way, the really goal here is final liberation. And an inquiring person can avoid the calamities and errors brought on by careless thinking. So the more thoroughly we can think through a problem in advance, we can hopefully avoid some of those problems. And such inquiry is the best remedy for curing the disease of the cycle of birth and death, which is really the purpose. But he also says something, too, that those with a clear intelligence and who ceaselessly practice inquiry eventually become benefactors to all, because such people are true seers. And they're true seers in the sense that they're able to provide clear vision and clear guidance because they're free from bias and self-interest and predisposition. So you think if you go to a teacher, somebody who's free from ego, the advice they give you should be the best possible advice you can get, because it's not governed by what they're getting out of the exchange, or it shouldn't be, but they should be able to look at your situation and say, I recommend this course of action. And that's why, teachers revere their students revere their gurus, because you're getting guidance that's clear. Something that might be blind to the student might be crystal clear to the teacher, and that's why they advise certain actions. The third gatekeeper is contentment, and true contentment is said to have arisen if nobody has if the person no longer has cravings for sense pleasures, satisfied with what comes unsought and does not make efforts to get what is not coming of its own. Contentment destroys all sins, and is sweeter than worldly enjoyment. And what is true contentment is achieved when the heart becomes pure. The last one, the gatekeeper number 4, is satsang, a holy company. The best guide on a person's journey, of course, is somebody who has been on that journey before. We know we hire guides if we're going on safaris or fishing or whatever, so it's always good. So the best guide on a spiritual journey is somebody who has recognized the truth, a holy person. And it's considered to be superior to all other practices, according to this book. And of course, it's recommended by many teachings and many teachers. And so that's a brief survey of the 4 gatekeepers. I'll just conclude with the benefits or the fruits of the 4. And the fruit of contentment is the supreme gain. The fruit of satsang is that it's the best companion and guide. The spirit of inquiry, the greatest wisdom, and self-control is the supreme happiness. Okay, so now I want to come back to the verses that we saw earlier and go through them in detail, which is sort of the culmination of the talk. I can skip over the soundtrack. I guess we can go through it one more time. Okay, so this is the first verse that we started with. We contemplate that glorious self, which reveals itself as the experience of pure bliss, Ananda, when the Shakshi, the witness, witnesses without dividing or divisions or without conceptualizing. So this is a really important verse, or at least it really brought out some subtleties to me when I first read it. Because first it tells you the conditions under which the self, the bliss, manifests. What is experience? Pure bliss, one of the characteristics of our true nature. When do we get it? Whenever the witness consciousness, which is us, the seer, comes into contact with the seen, so long as such contact occurs without a division or conceptualization. And so we're going to dive down into that a little bit more, but I want to do the next verse first. We contemplate the self in which objects are reflected without volition, without will. Once, the divided experience of subject-object and the intention, will, or volition which has created the divided experience totally cease. Okay, so obviously this has got to be done through practice and observation. Most of the time, the world we're experiencing is processed through thought. But as long as there's division, or if there is no division and no conceptualization, then no separation between I and the world happens. Okay, we become literally one with what we're being experienced. Now, the verses here from Vasishta go pretty deep, and it takes some meditation and contemplation here. But first of all, these ideas do reconcile logically the idea of multiplicity and duality within a non-dual philosophy. So originally you'd think, or I was thinking way back, that a non-dual philosophy would have nothing, and then you'd always get into that question, well, if there's non-dual, why is there a world? Why is there multiplicity? And how do I reconcile oneness with that? But within the transcendent and quiescent consciousness, forms do arise spontaneously. The divine creates for the sake of creating. Forms rise and fall at the will of the divine. Observation of life shows this. One school of Advaita Vedanta says that these forms do not actually materialize, but are superimposed on the consciousness, much like the rope and the snake, or the blueness of the sky. And so when we realize that it was really a rope, we shouldn't really ask about, well, where did the snake go? Or the characteristics of the snake, because the snake was never really there. In both Mandukya Upanishad and Vedanta, the Yoga Vasishta say this, that the world is a long dream. And so if we can simply witness without preconceived ideas those objects which are neither willed, projected, desired, or rejected, you'll find that they are accompanied by bliss. And this can only happen when the psychological conditioning is totally absent. Remember, we saw that at the opening. Whatever the psychological, stop not until the psychological conditioning is removed entirely. Until this can be done, the seen remains projected from our ego state and thus separated from us by our own self-made, dreamlike conceptualizations. Their appearance is preconceived based on the idea of what the ego thinks should be seen, and is the preconceived notion of what the object is, or even more forcefully, should be. Thus, each object has attributes or adjectives associated with it, assigned to it by our own preconditioning. We create and maintain the snake, our own dream. Further, with an ego present, there will always arise the idea that I myself, whoever I is seeing these objects, and that creates a duality right there. So the questions who is asking and who is complaining was often used by teachers like Ramana Maharshi and other teachers of Vedanta to focus the attention of the people who came to them or who come to them for advice or learning. Whatever you ask your question, they would say, well, who's asking the question? And they would make you peel back that layer of conditioning. Who am I? Who am I? With the ultimate goal of getting you to realize I am the pure witness consciousness. And Ramana Maharshi is credited with some quotes, a couple of which are important here for this part of the talk. He says, the entire existence is my guru, and eradication with identification with the body is charity. Eradication with identification of the body is austerity. Eradication with identification with the body is devotion. Eradication with identity of the body is peace and jnana and truth and liberation. And so he goes. He assaults all of those with that one behavior. So before one talks about the illusion of reality, just ask, who is observing the illusion? Who is the seer of the snake is a more important question than asking about details of the snake. We should practice it this way. And so perhaps if you meditate or practice meditation, maybe some object comes before your awareness spontaneously, and without the notion that I am experiencing this object, or some preconceived notion that this should be such and such. And if that happens, or when that happens, look inward and just see, is that experience accompanied by bliss? And if you find it to be so, then with repeated practice, you'll also observe that as soon as the notion that I am having this experience or I am enjoying this, the bliss goes away. So it takes study of these verses to understand them at the logical, intellectual level, and careful and regular observation to experience them as truths testified by the scriptures, and more practice to make them regular. I remember long before I even heard of Vedanta, I remember somebody, I think it was probably a secondary student of Vedanta, or maybe not a disciple per se, but somebody who had read it. And they advised just going out on a warm night, comfortable night, and go look at the sunrise, or the sunset, sorry. And just look at it without letting any adjectives or anything come into your mind. Just try to experience it as an intuitive sense. And they said that's a wonderful practice. And that might be a great place to start with some of these ideas. And then often we say that there's a jiva or an ego experiencing all this, and then in the Yoga Vasishtha, Rama also asked this question to Vasishtha, and the question was, when the only reality is the infinite consciousness and its inherent kinetic power, the ability to manifest forms, how does the jiva acquire an apparent reality in the secondless unity? And Vasishtha explained that in the mind of the ignorant alone does this terrible goblin known as jiva arise. You can ask what it is, O Rama, but neither the sages or people of wisdom can actually say, because it is devoid of any indications of its nature. It is one of countless numbers of reflections in the ocean of infinite, which arises due to the inherent nature of the consciousness itself. Such a limitation in the infinite consciousness then takes on a conditioning sense called I-ness, ego, and begins to entertain its own notions, concepts, and ideas. These notions, concepts, and ideas then conjure up the elements, and here they're talking about the subtle elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, the five subtle. And then those subtle elements go on to condense, is the word that they use, into more physical forms like energy, and then finally solid forms. And then he says, being a spark of infinity, it goes on to create countless forms accordingly. Creation of the mind is but an agitation in consciousness. The world seems to exist in such a mind like a long dream due to imperfect vision and imperfect understanding. In Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, he has a nice paragraph which also says, gives this very nice description of this, and I'll read it because I think it really drives home all of the points of the lecture in a few minutes. He says, thus it is with all of us in this Maya, this dream world, where it is all misery, weeping and crying, where a few golden balls are rolled around and the world scrambles after them. You were never bound by laws. Nature never had a bond for you. That is what the yogi tells you. Have patience to learn it, and the yogi shows how. By junction with nature and identifying itself with the mind and the world, the Purusha, you can think in the Atman, I guess, the self, thinks itself miserable. Then the yogi goes on to show you the way out. The way out is through experience. You have to get all of this experience, but finish with it quickly. We have placed ourselves in this net and we will have to get out. We have got ourselves caught in the trap and we will have to work out our freedom. Experience is the one great teacher, but no, it is only experience. It leads step by step to that state where all things become small and the Purusha so great that the whole universe seems as if a drop in the ocean and falls off to nothingness. We have to go through different experiences, but never let us forget the ideal. So I have one last quote to finish the talk. Consciousness without conception is the eternal Brahman. Consciousness with conceptualization is thought. And as I was thinking about this verse, another verse came to my mind. I want to go back yet. So the verse that came to mind comes from the New Testament in Matthew. It says, judge not, lest ye not be judged. And as I was thinking of that, judge not, lest ye not be judged, I said, well, can we apply that in the following way? Conceptualize not, and you will not be conceptualized. So think about it. That's sort of my interpretation of the conclusion. Swami Adishwarananda, with some supporting there, said pretty much that. We had saw that before. Maya is the very mind which attempts to divide the indivisible. So let us not take part in that division, and we will not be divided from the infinite reality, which is our true nature. Thank you, friends. I'm already over a little bit. Why, are there any questions that people wanted to?
You mentioned that the Mahavakyanis are associated with different monasteries. I was just wondering what those monasteries are. Is that the Shankara Mats?
Yeah, yes, right. He founded the original four, one in the north, one in the south, one in the east, and one in the west, and each one of those has one of those Mahavakyanis associated with it, as well as a Veda, one of the four Vedas associated with it, and the corresponding Upanishad.
So actually, in a simplistic way, when we are dreaming, during that period we think it's real. But when we wake up, we realize that was a dream. We don't realize that until we wake up, in Mandukya Upanishad. And similarly, when we are in the unreal existence, when we transcend into the real existence, we become consciousness.
Yes. At that point, when you wake up to the highest reality, at that point you can. That's all of the sages who have experienced this for reality give these teachings. And they say that's truth. You have to wake up from this experience. In the same way you wake up from the dream to realize that, oh, wait a minute, I flew to India on an elephant last night, and I got back in time for this morning, right? That's a dream. You wake up, you say that's inconsistent with the logic of this waking realm. When you realize the highest, according to the teacher of Vedanta, you realize all of these things as well are dreamlike and illusory. Yeah, that's correct. I think that was more of a comment, right, than a question? Yeah, okay.
Maybe online question.
Okay, no questions. Okay, so we'll do the announcements for the week. Swami Yogamananda is, I think he's due back tonight. According to the newsletter last week, he'll be in later tonight. The talk next Sunday was Isness of God. That will be given by Swami Yogamananda. The Tuesday and Friday classes will go on as usual. There's a day-long spiritual retreat by a Swami visiting Swami Anubhavananda. He's actually from the Saraswati Swamis. I think he was a disciple of Swami Chinmayananda or that lineage. He'll be here Thursday, May 11th, May 12th, and May 13th. On Thursday the 11th, he's going to have an informal question and answer session starting at 7:30 here. On the 12th, Friday, he's giving 2 classes on meditation. The time block is listed as 5:30 to 8:30. I'm assuming one starts at 5:30 and the other one probably starts at 7:30. And then on Saturday the 13th, Swami Anubhavananda is giving the day-long spiritual retreat on the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. You can please register for that online or on our website or with Naomi in the back of the room. Following the lecture, you're all invited to stay for soup supper. We'll do the closing prayer and then have arati.
Not coming on.
It's not coming on.
Yeah,
Okay. May the divine, who is Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Great Spirit of the Native Americans, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being manifest unto us and grant us abiding understanding and all-consuming divine love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Okay, we'll now have arati.
Breaker of all our worldly bondage and adored by all, we adore you too. Stainless Lord, assuming human form. Stainless Lord, assuming human form, transcendent yet filled with love. You free us from the stain of sin and ornament our world. Consciousness is your form. Your eyes always purified by knowledge. Your eyes always purified by knowledge. Looking at them, delusion is gone. Ocean of shining love and feeling, ever inebriated in your infinite love. Your feet always dear to your always dear to your devotees. Form our boat to cross this world. Reveal to us as God incarnate and the Lord of all things, helping us join with you. Your mind's always set in the divine light. Your mind's always set in the divine light. This we can see through your grace. Destroyer of our worldly sorrow and compassion soul, infinite is your work. Your life's offered for the world's deliverance. Your life's offered for the world's deliverance, saving us from darkness and fear. Renouncer of all lust and lucre, therefore you were always spurning sensual life. Lord of monks, you are the best of men. Lord of monks, you are the best of men. Grant to us pure love for you. You're fearless and you're free from doubting, with your mind very firmly resolved. Causeless refuge of your devotees, causeless refuge of your devotees, renouncing caste and birth. Our treasure is your holy feet, which take us very soon across this puddle of light. You give love and even-sightedness. You give love and even-sightedness to remove our anguish here. Our treasure is your holy feet, which take us very soon across this puddle of light. You give love and even-sightedness. You give love and even-sightedness to remove our anguish here. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Yet you are the basis of both. O Lord, oh, basis of both. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's cave. Darkness is destroyed by your light. O Lord, darkness is destroyed by your light. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Yet you are the basis of both. O Lord, yet you are the basis of both. light of all lights, blazing in the heartscape. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heartscape. Darkness is destroyed by your light. O Lord, darkness is destroyed by your light. Langa, ranga, bhanga, these are all the sounds of mridanga. Langa, ranga, bhanga, these are all the sounds of mridanga. Spiritual songs devotees are singing for your worship divine. Spiritual songs devotees are singing for your worship divine. Jaya Jaya for your worship divine. Hara Hara for your worship divine. Shiva Shiva for your worship divine. Breaker of all our worldly bondage and adored by all, we adore you too. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Auspicious and blessed, graciousness sublime, all noble ends you give to us, granting us refuge, all-seeing God. O Mother Divine, our love to you. Creation, preservation, dissolution are your powers, eternal one. Nature's real basis, nature's essence. O Mother Divine, our love to you. We come seeking refuge from anguish. Be our Savior through your deep concern. All our suffering remove, Goddess. O Mother Divine, our love to you. Victory, O Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. जय श्री राम कृष्ण देव की जय। जय श्री शारदा देवी की जय। जय श्री स्वामी विवेकानंद की जय। जय श्री बुद्धदेव की जय। जय